Hello and welcome to my Yu-Gi-Oh channel. Today we're going to be discussing the whole implications of the brand new Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links structure deck called Synchro Connection. Toon Warrior is a Earth Attribute Warrior type tuner monster. It's a level 3 with 1600 attack and 200 defense. This is, from what I remember, one of the first, if not the first, tuner monster to be introduced into the first set. I think it was either that or one of the structure decks. It might not have an effect, but considering it's got 1600 attack and it's a level 3 for a tuner, that's not bad. It's definitely something considering to be run, even though it was just like the beginning card, and arguably tuners have become that much stronger as the game has progressed. Junk Servant is an Earth Attribute Warrior type level 4 with 1500 attack and 1000 defense. Its effect is, if you control a junk monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. This isn't so much of an effect monster, it's just that it has the ability to special summon itself. That's okay and a decent enough effect, considering that actually if you special summon this whilst you've got junk synchron on the field, you can actually bring out your, I think it's junk archer, just instantly by having these two monsters on the field. Synchrobreaker is an Earth Attribute Warrior type level 4 with 1800 attack and 1000 defense. Its effect is, during your main phase, if this card was normal summoned this turn, you can tribute this card. All face-up monsters on the field have their effects negated until the end of this turn. It's a decent monster considering its attack stat. It's a level 4, so it actually synergizes quite well with the junk part of the archetype, and to be able to shut down all of your opponent's monsters' effects can be decent depending on what they're using, as certain monsters might try and disrupt you. Look at things like the Machine Emperor Weisel, who can shut down the use of spell cards, which is also key to how UC likes to duel. There is a significant worth of using at least one or two of these, but I would never recommend using 3. It would be excess overkill and you'd probably draw into the 3 at the same time, knowing my luck. I would mention as well that you do get 2 copies of this card within the structure deck, so even they're suggesting you use 2 of them. Junk Blader is an Earth Attribute Warrior type level 4 with 1800 attack and 1000 defense. Its effect is, you can banish one junk monster from your graveyard. This card gains 400 attack until the end of this turn. You should note that actually this effect can be used multiple times within the turn, so you can banish multiple junk monsters. That's fine because you can actually make this quite powerful. If you just get rid of 3, this becomes a 3000 attack monster, and it can overrun a lot of your opponent's monsters, but it almost forces you to focus on having junk as the main theme of the archetype, and as we all know, Yusei uses a combination of monsters outside of just this sub-archetype of junk. So I wouldn't recommend running too many of these. Within the structure deck, they will give you 2 copies. Junk Forward is an Earth Attribute Warrior type level 3 with 900 attack and 1500 defense. The effect is, if you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. I liken this a lot to Junk Servant, but this happens to be like a Cyber Dragon effect. If you have nothing and your opponent has something, then you can actually happen to special summon this card. The only thing is, it's just an inherent kind of special summon. It doesn't have any other effects to it, so it's just helpful for letting you normal summon into something else and then using the 2 cards as a synchro. Card Breaker is a light attribute warrior type level 2 with 100 attack and 900 defense. Its effect is, this card cannot be normal summoned or set. This card can only be special summoned in face-up attack position by sending 1 card from your spell and trap card zone to the graveyard. I'll mention, whilst this card is quite weak and it's relatively useless, it is meant purely for synchro summoning as synchro material, so that's the reason it's in here. It doesn't have a stat lineup justifying its use otherwise, and it works well with a card called Limiter Overload, which when it's destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you're then able to special summon a speed warrior from your, I think it's hand, deck or graveyard. So other than that synergy, and maybe some odd synergy with some other cards with that similar type of effect, outside of that, it's a very niche card, and from what I've seen from most duelists who have been using Yusei's deck, this is definitely not a card that's added within them. Junk Anchor is an Earth Attribute Warrior type tuner monster. It's a level 2 with 0 attack and 0 defense. Its effect is, for a synchro summon, you can substitute this card for any 1 synchron tuner. Once per turn, you can discard 1 card, then target 1 non-tuner junk monster in your graveyard, special summon that target, and if you do, immediately after this effect resolves, synchro summon 1 synchro material monster that lists a synchron monster as a tuner, using that monster and this card only. These synchro materials are banished instead of being sent to the graveyard. So this substitutes itself for any of your synchron monsters. So that's actually quite useful because normally your specific synchro monsters need a specific synchron, and that makes having to run multiple of different types of tuner monsters and then drawing into multiple tuner monsters when you absolutely don't need those cards and bricking your hand. By having this, you replace that effect completely and it makes it a lot easier to run the deck. Also, by being able to discard a card, you're just able to then go into a instant synchro play. And depending on what your situation is like, that can actually be the most ideal position you want to be in. Speed Warrior is a wind attribute warrior type level 2 with 900 attack and 400 defense. Its effect is once per battle phase. If this card was normal summoned this turn, except during the damage step, you can make its attack become double its original attack until the end of the battle phase. This card was used often by Yusei within the anime, and I can see why. It was basically one of his go-to cards to help synchro summon into something stronger, such as this jungle warrior. And initially it does end up with 1,800 attack points, which is fine considering it's a level 2, but it only has that one-off effect, so it's not particularly consistent. You do get 2 copies of these cards in the structure deck. Pride of the Weak is a continuous spell card with the effect when a level 2 or lower monster you control destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard. If you have no cards in your hand, you can draw 2 cards. It's quite good for the fact it is a pot of greed, but it is very conditional. You need to have a level 2 or lower monster to be able to destroy one of your opponent's monsters, so it's relying on your opponent to have a weak monster, and it's also relying on your weak monster to have enough of a stat lineup, perhaps having to rely on things like equip cards to be able to trigger off this effect. Also, you pretty much have to empty your hand, so if you've got high level monsters in your hand, you might not be able to activate this effect. Alternatively, you might be able to set things so that you do not have any cards in the hand, but it's very risky if your opponent's able to destroy those cards. And with anything such as Fuse Line, you are at a much more significant risk. Junk Barrage is an equipped spell card with the effect when the equipped monster destroys a monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, inflict damage to your opponent equal to half the destroyed monster's attack in the graveyard. This is almost like having a Ring of Destruction effect or something like a Flame Wingman, but it does like half the damage. I think Blaster, the Dragon Ruler, actually has that type of effect as well. So it's very common within certain archetypes and decks. And at least it's quite consistent if you pair it with the right monsters. Say, for example, with the example I gave before in a previous video, with Nitro Warrior, it's actually very useful because you can not only do the physical amount of damage, but you've also got the burn effect damage, and also if your opponent's monster happens to be in defense mode, you're then able to switch it and then attack in again for further battle damage and further effect damage, maybe being able to OTK within that turn. Harmonic Waves is a normal spell card with the effect target one face-up monster on the field. It becomes level 4 until the end phase. There are a few cards that do have the ability to cause level adjustments. This is one of them. It's not particularly costly because it's just using the one card, but to adjust a level just for this might not seem worth it. It's fine because that might be necessary to bring out a particular synchro monster, but it's definitely not something I would consider running for the time being, unless it's for an insurance policy. Graceful Revival is a continuous trap card with the effect activate this card by targeting one level 2 or lower monster in your graveyard, special summon that target in attack position. When this card leaves the field, destroy that monster. When that monster leaves the field, destroy this card. This is essentially a Call of the Haunted for weak monsters level 2 or lower, which is fine. Actually, that helps with your synchro plays, and it pairs well with Speed Warrior. Shapesister is a continuous trap card with the effect special summon this card as a normal monster. It's a fiend type tuner, earth attribute level 2 with 0 attack and defense. This card is also still a trap. You can only activate one Shapesister per turn. The interesting thing about this card is it's a tuner trap monster. I don't think there are any other examples of those, or if there are, please list those in the comments down below. Well, at least within Duel Links, this is the only example we've got. It's perfect for summoning some of your generic synchro monsters, as it's able to do that really easily. Just summoning an additional monster, that's fine. Synchro Strike is a normal trap card with the effect target synchro summon monster gains 500 attack for each synchro material monster used to summon it until the end phase. So the more materials you've used to summon the monster, the more likely you are to have a greater attack monster. considering you can only have 3 monsters on the field, so you could have potentially 1500 attack points boosted on it. For something like a Stardust Dragon, that makes it a 4000 attack monster, which is enough to get rid of some of your opponent's biggest threats. Spirit Force is a normal trap card with the effect, during your opponent's turn at damage calculation, make the battle damage you take from the battle 0, then you can add 1 warrior type tuner monster with 1500 or less defense from your graveyard to your hand. Not only does this provide you with a level of battle life point protection, but it also lets you recover a tuner monster, which you can use within your next turn. Limiter Overload is a normal trap card with the effect, if this card is sent to the graveyard, special summon 1 Speed Warrior from your hand, deck, or graveyard. This is the one I was telling you before that actually works with that level 2 monster. It just rips this card and then you're able to trigger that effect. Whilst it's not really that good of a card, it's very specific. Had it been maybe, I know Speed Warrior has a small archetypal theme within it. There are other warrior monsters that have this type of, synergy. There's like Rapid Warrior, there's a couple of other versions, but none of them really come under the same name. So it's not even that you can have a sub-archetype that can work really with this card. It's just too specific and too niche to consider running, which is why I'm confused why they've put 2 copies of this in the structure deck. Junk Warrior is a Dark Attribute Warrior type Synchro monster. It's a level 5 with 2300 attack and 1300 defense. It requires a Junk Synchron and 1 or more non-tuner monsters, and its effect is, if this card is Synchro Summoned, it gains attack equal to the total attack of all level 2 or lower monsters you currently control. If you happen to have a couple of monsters, say for example Quillbolt Hedgehog or Speed Warrior, this card can become over 3000 attack points, but it's a very niche example, and most likely you're not going to be able to meet this condition that easily. And the final card to be introduced is Gravity Warrior. This is an Earth Attribute Warrior type Synchro monster. It's a level 6 with 2100 attack and 1000 defense. It requires 1 tuner plus 1 or more non-tuner monsters, and its effect is, when this card is Synchro Summoned, it gains 300 attack for each face-up monster your opponent controls. Once per turn during your opponent's battle phase, you can target 1 defense position monster your opponent controls, change it to face-up attack position, also if it must attack this turn if able. The nuisance about this card is it's a very specific effect. Whilst it does have the ability to become 3000 attack, it is reliant on your opponent for having face-up monsters. So if those are set, it's not gaining any attack points. If those monsters happen to be, 1 or 2 of them, then you've got a decent stat lineup on this card. And the condition is during your opponent's battle phase. If they choose not to go to the battle phase and just go to the end of their turn, then this effect never actually triggers. It's a massive nuisance to deal with and probably one of the weaker level 6 monsters. I mean, there's so many better ones you can use, including Yugioh Guardian, which is why I would not recommend having this card. And finally, this is one of the examples that they want to mention within their details of how the structure deck is meant to work. It's very simplistic and I don't think it's really that useful, but it says here that the example of a combo is Junk Anchor, Limiter Overload, and Junk Warrior. Activate the effect of Junk Anchor by targeting Junk Forward in your graveyard and discarding Limiter Overload from your hand. Then Synchro Summon Junk Warrior. The effect of Junk Warrior will activate upon Synchro Summon, and the effect of Limiter Overload will chain to it. Since the effect of Speed Warrior resolves first, Junk Warrior will have 3200 attack points. That's assuming it just basically gains the attack points of Speed Warrior. It's not overly impressive and is so simplistic a style of deck that if you were running this as a pure build, you'd be able to easily defeat this cookie cutter deck. It's ill-advised. I know people have really played into Yusei power with Shooting Star Dragon, and in a further video I am intending to kind of cover that deck and also cover the hopeful ways of defeating that deck in the future. What do you think of this structure deck? Did you like the design of it? What cards were your favourites? Was there anything you considered running within this deck? Or did you decide just to get it for your collection and potentially tear down the deck and restructure it to your preferences? Whatever you think, leave those comments down below, like the video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe for more daily Yu-Gi-Oh content.